You are listening to the Medical Education Network.
Welcome to Health Chat, the weekly podcast by the Medical Education Network, where we explore the people, technology, and innovations shaping the African healthcare landscape. I'm your host, Linda Ravenhill, and this week in our AI series, Code to Care, we're diving deep into the growing threat of cyber fraud. What is it? As a healthcare practitioner, how vulnerable are you? And perhaps most importantly, what can you do about it? And to help us decode the risks and face some stark realities, we're joined by Kevin Hogan, Head of Fraud Risk at Investec. Kevin, thank you so much for joining us today. Welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Linda, and thank you for having us.
That's fantastic. We're really excited to get going, and we've had some great interest from the community. So, Kevin, before we start our conversations, we always like to ask our guests to give us a little bit of background on you, your work, and how you got into cyber fraud.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to try and make that long story really short. I got into banking by accident. My motivation to get into banking was actually motivated by fear. Fear of not being able to get a job. You know, I was one of those 1994 kids. I was at varsity at the time, and there was this narrative that Caucasian males would have no impact and would not be able to get jobs. So I was motivated by fear, and the safest place to go was banking. You know, my aunt had worked at a bank for many years, and she seemed to have had quite a stable career. And I thought, okay, that sounds like it's for me. And essentially, I made a choice to go into banking out of fear. I was, yeah, I was a credit analyst for many years. I have a degree in financial risk management, so I was a credit analyst. I was doing credits, and I started out at Nedbank. I had a wonderful 9 years at Nedbank. It's a really nice organization to work for. And during my tenure at Nedbank, probably about 3 or 4 years in, Nedbank decided to start a fraud prevention unit. But basically, the banks were investigating frauds that had already happened, but they weren't proactively trying to stop the fraud. And that's where I started to learn this trade. So I was asked to join the team, just, you know, give it a bash, see if you like it. I had zero experience, zero qualifications. I was a bit of a computer nerd. I loved playing video games and stuff like that. So I understood technology. And they asked us to join the team. It was application fraud initially, vetting applications for fraud, false IDs, false payslips, false bank statements, people lying about their income in applications, things like that. And that's how it started. And then what I've learned through the years is that rely on people who've got the experience. Don't try and figure things out for yourself. So I dove very deeply into talking to a lot of people that had a vast experience in this world. So people at Home Affairs who had, learned things over the years and were dealing with fraud, ex-policemen that were involved in banking and vehicle theft and all that. And I was exposed to a whole bunch of this stuff. Eventually, I found myself at Standard Bank, and I did a 3-year stint there at Standard Bank. I also just kept learning and learning and learning, and I was very privileged. I got to experience all frauds: vehicle finance fraud, credit card fraud, home loan fraud, and obviously, I had quite a pennant for cyber-related stuff because of my geekiness. And I arrived here at Investec. And the bulk of the fraud at Investec was actually cyber-related. We didn't have branches. And most of the fraud that we were seeing was being perpetrated over a laptop. And so I threw myself head deep into what you understand as cyber fraud, and learned as well. And 13 years later, I'm here at Investec, understanding the ecosystem really well, what is going on in the industry. And I suppose if you had to say to me, Kevin, what do you specialize in? It's really what you call social engineering, how the fraudsters are manipulating the human being to steal from you on a computer. And what I try to do is take what I learn, what I understand, what that impact is on clients, and translate that into the bank to say, what extra precautions can we build into our systems? What extra steps can we build into our processes to help our clients not be victims of fraud? And this is where I find myself today.
Holy moly. So Sherlock Holmes meets Bill Gates meets.
I don't know about the Bill Gates part, but I have a little bit of that Sherlock Holmes thing going. I always say to friends of mine, if I didn't meet my wife the way I did, I've known my wife since I was 6 years old, so we basically came out of the womb married. And if I wasn't married and if I didn't have kids, I'd probably work for the CIA. I love that sort of thing. I like that whole clandestine, undercover thing. So there's a part of me that digs it, and so this is where I find myself.
So murder mysteries are your thing then. Okay. Okay. Kevin, that's brilliant and super interesting. But let's get going on this conversation.
Sure.
To kick us off, I thought I would just try and contextualize the scale of the issues that we're facing, because I think many of our practitioners, it's something they hear about in the background, but they maybe don't think it applies to them. So I found an article published this month, actually, by Checkpoint, which said that healthcare organizations in South Africa face an average of 1,626 cyber attacks per week. And globally, that healthcare saw a 39% increase in attempted cyber attacks, in the first 3 months of this year compared to last year. So, I mean, that is really quite startling. And most of us just carry on our day, oblivious that this sort of scale is happening. So, for those who are new to this space, what exactly is cyber fraud? What falls under that? And what are we protecting and from whom?
Yeah, thank you. So yes, unfortunately, the medical industry is super vulnerable to this type of attack. So Investec's quite uniquely positioned in that we bank more than 50% of the country's medical practitioners. It's just a legacy thing. The bank was actually started only banking medical practitioners. That's how we actually started. So we got a lot of experience there. And as a result of being able to see the medical industry with a lens like that, I can safely say to you that as a demographic, medical practitioners are the most targeted demographic in the industry that I can see. There are a couple of reasons for that, which I'll expound on as we go through the chat. But to answer your question directly, cyber fraud is not what you think it is. You hear this word hacking, and it conjures this picture in your brain of some sinister guy with his hoodie on, sitting in a dark room with all these screens and computers, and he's a complete computer geek, and he can do all this wizardry on a computer. And if he decides to target your practice, if he decides to target a specific hospital, that you just end up being sitting ducks. And basically, it's you running through a field being shelled with mortars, essentially. And that is not what hacking is at all. It's a movie misnomer. Now, there are elements of this type of hacking, but that generally is done by nation states or by syndicates like North Korea. The bulk of North Korea's income is through the sale of illicit drugs and cybercrime. This is how they make money. Wow. And so in the medical world, on the ground, for you and I sitting here, what it actually is what I mentioned earlier that I specialize in is social engineering. You are manipulating the human being to interact with technology in such a way that the human being thinks that what they are doing is completely normal and safe, but what you are actually doing is playing into the hands of the fraudsters and allowing them to gain access to your bank accounts, your medical accounts, your servers that are hosting your clients' information, allowing them to install viruses or malware onto your software. And the easiest way to do this is to manipulate the human being. So the real culprit or the real issue when you talk about cyber-related frauds is the actual user. It is not the technology. The technology only does what you tell it to do. So if the user is manipulated to do something nefarious, which to them appears completely safe, the fraudsters will then gain access. So let me give you an example. You will get a rogue email or SMS out of the blue that says your Netflix subscription is about to expire. In order for you to continue to enjoy Netflix, we need you to update your payment records. And there's a little link at the bottom of the SMS or the email. It can even come over WhatsApp, whatever it is. So you think, oh, great, I don't want to not watch Netflix. So you click on the link and a page opens asking you to update your credit card information. You start filling in your credit card information. You then push the button update, and a screen is presented to you that says, please enter the one-time PIN you receive in order to authenticate your transactions. What you don't actually realize is happening is that you are now giving away your card information to the fraudsters. They are harvesting that information while you were doing it. And the one-time PIN that you receive has got nothing to do with you updating your card information or making a payment. What is actually happening is the one-time PIN is being sent from your bank because the fraudsters have uploaded your card information onto a cell phone and now are asking the bank to authorize that card information to be loaded on that cell phone. Now, part of the journey here is that a lot of people are apathetic to what happens on their devices or their computers, because the psychology behind this is when I'm behind my laptop, like we are now, or when I'm behind my cell phone, I am safe. No one can get to me. I'm sitting in my home. I'm sitting in my office. I'm sitting on the loo. No one can get to me, right? Because I'm in a safe place. But what you don't realize is that if you're connected to the internet and you're on a laptop or you're on a cell phone, the fraudster can get to you. So you have this false sense of security. So you do dumb things online, like putting in your card credentials in a link that you have no idea where that is going. You then get this one-time PIN. You don't read why you're getting the one-time PIN, because psychologically you're manipulated into thinking, oh, it's to authorize my card information on Netflix. And you don't, and you give away that one-time PIN and you give away your card information to the fraudster. And this is what social engineering is. This is the beauty of how cyber criminals are manipulating human beings. That's what it is.
That's not frightening at all. Okay, so I think we've kind of covered a couple of my next questions. Just I think maybe it would be useful to just unpack three of the most common terms that we hear just for the conversation. And that is ransomware, phishing, and that sort of data breaches. Could you just maybe take us through the most common terms that you encounter that users will come across?
Yeah. So I think the most common one that is more than likely the biggest culprit is phishing. Now, all phishing is exactly what I described in the Netflix example, is you are being sent communication over email, over SMS, over WhatsApp. You can even be phished over the phone, okay? And that's what we call phishing. It's essentially a mechanism to send you information that is used to manipulate you. And so when you are phished, you are basically sent emails or someone phones you to manipulate you into doing something that you ordinarily wouldn't do. So, for example, you might get a link that looks like it comes from your bank that says, oh, you're about to become KYC non-compliant. It's been 5 years. We need to update KYC. Please click on the link and update your KYC information. You click on the link and a page opens that looks like your bank's login. So if it's NetBank, it'll be a NetBank page. If it's FNB, it'll be an FNB and Investec, whatever it is. And you go onto this page thinking in your head you're going to update KYC, and you put in your username and password. You give away your login credentials to the fraudsters. So that's the primary goal of phishing, is to manipulate you into giving away your information, username and password, credit card information, or even personal information. Now, what phishing can also do, like you mentioned earlier, ransomware, phishing can be used to deliver a payload. Okay, so I attach a PDF, I attach a execution file to the email. Okay, and so when you get this phishing email or SMS and you click on it, it executes a download. Now, you don't know that that is happening. Your computer doesn't tell you, oh, we are now downloading. The moment you click on that email, it starts to download. The moment you click on the PDF, it starts to download. It's embedded there. And that's why some of these large hospital groups have fallen victim to ransomware, because someone on the network inadvertently clicked on one of these links, on one of these attachments in these phishing emails, and the ransomware downloaded onto the network. And so the other thing I want to point out to you is that it requires the interaction of a human being to execute most of these attacks. Okay. The other important one that I think your audience should be aware of is phishing. So it's the telephone version of phishing, where you get phoned and manipulated over the phone. So the most common one we're seeing at the moment is they pretend to be from your bank. And they say to you, oh, we're phoning from the bank's fraud department. We can see that there's fraud on your credit card or your bank account. You may even have received an SMS that looks like a fake fraudulent transaction. And they then manipulate you over the phone to say, okay, you need to go in and do this. You need to click on this, click on that. And it's really just a verbal form of phishing for you to give away your information. I think lastly, the other important one is, for me, especially in the Investec context, the most common frauds that we see that are affecting people, especially medical practitioners, is the phishing. the phone, the phishing piece, and credit card related fraud when people are shopping online. Those are the most common ones that most people, especially if you're not a company or anything like it, will experience as a result of being a banking client.
Grief. Okay, so that's great. So I think you've probably already addressed that. What are the most pressing cyber fraud threats in healthcare today? But I mean, have you seen a shift in the last 5 years? Apart from an escalation, has the nature of it changed? And I
It
guess
is starting to change, yes.
it is starting to change. Okay, because I guess my next question would be, are they just getting more sophisticated, or are we just
No, they are getting more
struggling?
sophisticated. So your timing is actually quite good. So traditionally, phishing has been the primary modus that is used, and phishing has not changed. So, for example, when COVID happened, phishing was exactly the same as it's always been. It was just wrapped in a COVID ribbon. Now it was about PPEs. It was about a payment to a company making masks or sanitizer or whatever. So the ribbon just changed, but the core modus of phishing remained the same. And that has just been going on for years and years and years. The same with stealing credit card credentials. That same modus has been going on for years and years and years. But what we are starting to see, and it's very scary, I'm very concerned about this, is they are now using phishing to deliver virus payloads to cell phones. So let me give you an example. We had a client who was sent a DSTV communication concerning their account. They also received a phone call from someone pretending to be from DSTV to say, listen, you need to update stuff. But the easiest way for you to engage us is to download our app. And they send you a link over WhatsApp or SMS. You push this button and you download this app, apparently. But what you've actually downloaded is what we call a remote virus on your phone, which gives the fraudster access to your phone, and they can do anything on your phone that they want. It's essentially giving the fraudsters a remote control to your device. And the fraudsters can then log into your bank accounts. They can do whatever they want. It records your screen. Like you're recording me now, you can see everything that I'm doing. That virus does exactly the same thing. Now, what I say to people is, yeah, that sounds very James Bondy and very scary, but go back right to the beginning. How did you get that virus in the first place? It's exactly what we described in the beginning. You got a phishing email, you got a phishing SMS, you got something on, and you clicked on something to execute that download. And if we can get people not to click on these links, not to click on these execution files, not to be manipulated over the phone into cooperating with someone who sounds very professional. Um, Basically, and I know it's very glass half full, but you have to be skeptical of everybody that phones you. For example, me, I don't answer phones that are not in my contact list. If you phone me and it just comes up as a cell phone number or it doesn't tell me who you are not getting answered. You need to WhatsApp me and tell me who you are and what you want. Otherwise, I do not answer your phone call. And so, unfortunately, there is a fair amount of skepticism or a healthy amount of skepticism that has to be included in your daily life.
So things like just to go back to the links and the clicking on links, because this was one of the questions that our users asked us. Things like WhatsApp, clicking on links in WhatsApps. So obviously there's a rise in medical groups coming online and sharing information like related to CPD, and within that there are links. So I would assume the same applies to, it's just to any link really.
It's basically anything. So we even have this challenge is how do you behaviorally tell people don't click on links, right? But how do you actually carry on with business as usual?
Exactly.
So you want them to go to a specific place, and the cheapest way for them to get there is by clicking on a link. So how do you create a secure environment that they can engage in order to not feel that they're being subverted? So let me give an example. We are on a journey to try and create an environment where instead of us sending you an email or a link or something, we'll say to you, we have delivered you something that you need to engage with. So let's say it's your ITB3 for your tax or whatever the case is. We would send that into your online banking. And we'll send you a message to say you can go and fetch your IT3B in online banking. And you have to log into your bank account through all the security that is there and go and collect your information. So we are on this journey to see how we can create the secure environment that our clients can communicate with us on. Email is the most unsecure way on the planet to communicate with anybody ever. But also, it comes at a very low cost and it's very convenient. As soon as you start to protect yourself from those things, the costs start to rise and the convenience level starts to increase. The inconvenience level starts to increase. So, where do you find that sweet spot?
Yeah,
That's the issue.
and I think you've actually touched on something as well, that there are two parties here. There's the person sending the information and you, the receiver, and we'll
Correct.
get into that a little bit later. So, I mean, what I'm hearing, Kevin, and I think there is another a misconception amongst the practitioners, that it's really the individual. In my practice, let's just talk about my practice, I'm not really a threat. It's the bigger hospitals, the bigger players like the National Laboratory, those guys. But what I'm hearing, it's everybody, right?
It's everybody, yeah. I mean, so if you attack a company, the payoff could be very big, right? So let me give an example. We had one of the first incidences of deep fake phishing. It's essentially manipulating over video like this. How do you know you're talking to the real Kevin and not an AI engine? Maybe. There was a story in America about 2 years ago where the CFO was, they basically edited a deep fake of him. He then called one of the staff, and this person, like you and I are chatting now, basically chatted to her and said, "Look, you need to pay this, pay this, pay this." And she ended up paying over $23 million as a result of this interaction with this deep fake. And all deep fake is just an absolute pinnacle of what phishing is. It's essentially manipulation. And so she gets manipulated over what she thinks is a legitimate video call with the CFO and then moves the money. So, yes, corporates are the big payoffs, but you can only manipulate so many corporates, and generally their security is pretty good. I mean, at Investec, I mean, we spend so much time and effort. So the payoff for the effort may not be there. So who do they target? The low-hanging fruit. A medical practice, absolute low-hanging fruit. We've seen it. I mean, I've lost count of how many practices have had fraud. Let me give you an example of the most common fraud that a practice can experience, and it's what we call BEC, or business email compromise, or simply stated email hacking. In 2 minutes, I'll describe it to you. So, if you do not use a billing aggregator, so a lot of you go to these conferences, and there are companies who advertise to say that we will do your billing for you, we'll do your invoicing for you, we'll do all of that. And that's great, right? But a lot of you do that stuff yourself, right? So now you want to bill a client. So your receptionist or your practice manager emails an invoice to a non medical aid client. So not every client is on medical aid. You're going to invoice somebody for something. Maybe the medical aid didn't cover everything and there's a gap that you've got to be paid. So you email your bank details on the invoice to this person. What you don't realize is either your email account or that person's email account has been compromised. Okay, the hackers have gotten in and they've created filter rules. So in the filter rules, you can add keywords like bank details, invoice, payment, whatever it is. Those filter rules in that email account will intercept that invoice. It'll delete it. Your client will never get the original invoice, and it'll forward it automatically to the fraudsters. The fraudsters then open that invoice. They change your bank details on the invoice. They close it and then send that email onto your client, and they spoof your email address so it looks like it comes from you.
Was that what happened? I think it was ZocDoc, I think, had a problem. There was something doing the rounds about that. Are you familiar with that story? It
There
sounds
are
very,
so many.
yeah.
So I suppose the one that created the most noise was ENS versus Horden. This was a lady who was buying a property. She had been hacked, and the deposit for the house was intercepted by the fraudsters, and not paid to ENS. It was paid to the fraudsters. That was 500,000 rand. And so this is the most common fraud that medical practitioners themselves could fall victim to. And so, how do you set yourself up that knowing that fraud? So, let me give you a stat that always surprises medical practitioners. And this is true, this is not a made up stat. You have a 23% chance of catching the seasonal flu on average. Okay. You have a 28% chance that this email hacking fraud will happen to you. So, you are more likely to be a victim of this email hacking fraud than you are to catch the flu. Okay, that's how prevalent it is. It is the number one business fraud in the world.
Gosh.
It's the number one business fraud in South Africa. So the remedy is this: email is not secure. Okay. So now, if I can't email my client my invoices, how do I secure myself? How do I just secure that communication? So, how do you get your bank details into your client's hands in a secure manner? So, maybe it's giving them a pre printed document when they come to you for a consultation. Maybe it's putting a little snap it frame in your practice and say, please take a picture of our bank details before they leave. Maybe it's that. One of the cheapest ways you can also do that is instead of sending your invoices over email, you send it over WhatsApp. So you do use WhatsApp for business, right? Now, WhatsApp for business is not your cell phone, it's a desktop application. The reason I say that is WhatsApp's encrypted end to end. So you can't intercept the message once it's left you. And you can attach documents to WhatsApp. So you get a very big security lift at a very low cost. And everybody's got WhatsApp. So don't be sending your invoices over email. Don't be sending copies of X-rays over email. Personal diagnoses that could be intercepted and seen over email. Send that stuff over WhatsApp to your clients. It's a much more secure way to share high risk information because this is what the fraudsters are doing. They're intercepting that information, okay, because your security is not great. And I know that we'll discuss that just now. And they're getting into your stuff. And one of the things is this email hacking, and it's probably the number one fraud in the medical space. Okay.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to take you back just slightly
Sure.
to chat a little bit more about the deep fakes.
Yes, sure.
Just maybe with a bit of a medical background.
Sure.
I've read a lot that there's this rise with the growth of generative AI. So I guess,
Yeah.
to maybe talk a little bit about the AI and the deep fakes and how things have changed, how the game has changed.
So I think first and foremost, please understand that deep fakes are not the prevalent modus.
Sure.
Okay. This is very new, and it takes a lot of skill and a lot of computing power to do a good deep fake that's going to dupe someone. So this is the exception, it is not the rule. Okay. Phishing is the rule. The likelihood that you will be phished is very high. I think all of us get phished all the time. For example, how many of us have received that SMS or email that says you have a package waiting for delivery? We've all gotten it. That is phishing an SMS.
Fastware couriers are my
exactly
favorite email client.
exactly. And all of us have gotten it.
Yeah.
And that's bread and butter. So deep fakes is not bread and butter. They are the exception, not the rule. But this risk does exist. Okay, it's as simple as that. So, for example, if you engage your clients, you're doing online medical consultations, and then all of a sudden you need to chat with the client about payment and stuff. Now you've got the fraudster coming on and makes himself appear to be your client. You could divulge information to that individual that they shouldn't have. Someone could intercept, like even on this session we're in now, someone could intercept it and replace me and give information. But again, the computing power necessary to do that is huge. The skill level is huge. So these generally are highly sophisticated syndicates, and generally they go after big ticket items like your corporates and stuff like that. I'm not sure how far away we are where they will use all that time and effort to target an individual or an small business. I think the amount of work that is required and the payoff that you get is not worth it. So yes, deepfakes are there. It is absolutely possible. The likelihood is very low at this stage. But I mean, with the pace that technology is accelerating, we may be having a different conversation in the next 2 years. The only thing I say to that is if you have a video call with someone, always authenticate it with a follow-up phone call. If they're asking you to pay, if they're asking you to move money, if they're asking you to change bank accounts, things like that. And I know it sounds really pessimistic, the glass half full again, but a follow-up authentication when you are given instructions that could compromise you in some way will go a very long way in preventing fraud. That's exactly how you prevent this email hacking fraud. Your clients need to authenticate the bank details before they pay. So if you can't get those bank details to them in a secure way, your client doesn't know that he has to phone and authenticate your bank details. And what's going to happen is that if he pays the fraudster, you're going to be very upset with him because the money's gone. He's going to think that you're a terrible doctor, not from a medical standpoint of view, but from an admin point of view. because he now had fraud as a result of engaging with you. So the day has now come where being a good doctor, being a good specialist is not enough. You have to run your practice, the administration of your practice, soundly as well, because that can compromise your reputation.
Yeah, and defensively. So I want to come back to AI, but since we're talking this, we have these regulations. We have PIA, we have various other regulations to protect, consumers from these things. But I'm interested in understanding who bears the risk. I don't know if that's something you can answer. Like, if this does happen, the worst case scenario happens, who's responsible ultimately?
Well, I suppose there are two sides of the coin to this. So, one, if you're a victim of cyber fraud, they're after the money. And you can be manipulated into giving your login details away, your card information away, and they steal your money. The other side of the coin is that they get into your systems to steal data. Okay. And generally, we see these with big hospital groups and things like that. Now, stealing the data in and of itself is probably not a massive risk to patients or to you. But ultimately, what tends to happen is that the regulators come in and issue large fines. So I think your biggest risk is actually the fine that you're going to get. And then the secondary biggest risk is the reputation issue as well. And so some of these fines are enormous. So if you're a large hospital group and you have means, you could end up with a 30, 40, 50 million rand fine for a data breach. If you're a smaller practice, you might get, I don't know, 100,000 rand fine, 500,000 rand fine, because personal identifiable information has been stolen. So really what they're going to do is look at, how did you secure this information? How did the theft happen? And you're going to have to go through those steps and checks and balances. And really, let's be honest, a doctor running a private practice is not geared and hasn't really thought about, how do I set myself up to prevent this eventuality from potentially happening to me? Because I would assume a lot of practitioners have got digital files. I mean, we've certainly seen medical practitioners who don't have paper files on their clients at all. They are all digital files. What if those files get stolen? Where does that leave you? Can you afford the fine? Do you need insurance against that risk? From an IT perspective, what steps and precautions should you be taking? And those are the questions, unfortunately, that need to be answered.
That we need to ask. It's almost like a checklist we need to start putting together, especially for new practitioners. Oh, actually, that's not
Exactly
true. I think everybody, but I think particularly new practitioners starting out, if you start out the right way, you'll save yourself a lot of trouble down the line.
And the mistake we see people making is, I've got an IT guy that keeps all my stuff running. So my printer works and my Wi-Fi works and my software is up to date. So my IT guy takes care of that stuff for me. But he's not an IT security specialist. And a lot of these guys try to sell themselves off as having a dual expertise. Not only do they make your hardware run beautifully and all your software is up to date and everything connects and works, but now can look after your security. And that's one of the biggest mistakes I see being made, because now you've got someone who, it's not their core function to look after security, who's now advising you. Now he's saying, oh, install this antivirus and do this and do this. And really he's selling you a product. That's what he's doing. And so I always encourage people to say, well, don't rely on the IT guy to do your security. You need to have an IT guy and you need to have a security guy. They are very different disciplines.
Yeah, I also think the silo approach from a security point of view is always the better one. So Kevin, AI, just to go back to the AI, since this is called the AI files, future-proofing and AI. I mean, do you think AI is responsible for this dramatic surge forward in what you're seeing in cyber fraud, or do you think it would have happened regardless? And how do you think AI is changing the game?
So I think it would have happened regardless, but I think the volume that we are seeing, potentially AI has a contributing factor. Because, for example, we're now seeing instances where people can forge passports or IDs using AI. It's no longer me going to, I can actually tell you where it is if you want to get one. I'm trying to remember the name now. Rocky Street in Yeovil in Johannesburg. That's where you go and buy fake IDs. Okay, they actually call it Little DH. Yeah, they call it Little DHA. So if you ever want a fake ID, go to Rocky Street in Yeovil. So these guys are manufacturing fake documents, and they, copy, paste, and drag, and And then the quality is sometimes good and sometimes it's not. But now you've got AI who are creating these documents, and you have to be really good to pick up that that document is fake. Same with phishing. I develop a phishing email to trick you, like we did with the Netflix example. And I type it out and I create nice logos. Now I can just tell AI, say, AI, please create a phishing email. This is what I want the phishing email to do. This is what I want it to look like. This is the company. And the AI will literally do it for you. So you can exponentially speed up the volume of attacks that you can perpetrate using AI. So I think we've seen a massive increase in volume. And obviously, the more volume, the more success and the more victims. So the core mode is generally staying the same, but AI computer technology is aiding, speeding that up and creating the volume that is yeah, we haven't seen in a long time.
Oh, okay. Kevin, I've got some questions here. I think it's a good
Sure.
time to bring those
Sure.
in. So we always have an Ask the Expert session. And here's one from Lindy Wemakwena. She says, I'm a GP in running a small private practice in Johannesburg. We don't have an in-house IT team, to your point.
Yep.
How do I know if my patient data is adequately protected? And what's the minimum I should be doing without breaking the bank?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a really good question. So my first advice is get an IT security specialist to come and consult. There is a capital outlay initially, but I think the payoff in the long term is much better. I would, especially medical practitioners, you guys are not wired like this. Don't try and self-service yourself. Don't go and do research and say, okay, if I do A, B, and C, I should be fine. My advice here is get hold of an IT security specialist, tell them what your concerns are. They will more than likely do an audit on the practice, say, okay, here are your vulnerabilities. This is what we think you should do. And then follow their advice, budget for it, and go down that road. Because remember, there's a 28% likelihood that you'll fall victim to one of these frauds.
Okay, that's great. And here's one from an anesthetist in Lagos. I hope I'm pronouncing his name. It's Dr. James Alawale. He says, this is quite interesting given our conversation. I've noticed a rise in fake WhatsApp messages and emails pretending to be from medical suppliers. How do I train my staff to spot phishing attempts when they're already overwhelmed with clinical work?
Well, I suppose there is technology that you can throw at it. So, for example, here at Investec, we have technology in our email servers that will interrogate an email before it gets delivered to the staff's inbox. It opens the email, it looks for viruses, it looks at the structure of the email, what it's doing, why it's asking. And if it deems that email to be unsafe, you just won't get it at all. It filters all that stuff out. So I suppose you can add software that can filter a lot of that nonsense out. And again, you would need to consult with an IT security specialist to help you do that. Okay. In the WhatsApp ecosystem, the problem with that is that no one controls that except Meta. They are controlling how it works, how it operates, and everything. So this is just my personal advice. And I think as a business, Investec, we don't like WhatsApp because it's an open source software. We can't control it, we can't contain it, and so we can't decide what that engagement looks like. So we shy away from it completely. And my advice to you is that I don't think you should be using WhatsApp to receive tenders or respond to tenders or anything financial. The only thing, like I said right in the beginning, that potentially WhatsApp could help you with is sending information to your clients securely. But again, there's a fine line, and we created this problem earlier where you send someone a link. How do they know it's safe for them to click on or something to open up? So it's a bit of a catch-22. But unfortunately, it's never going to end. That is going to stay with you until forever. And so perhaps deploying some software on your computers and your servers, but WhatsApp specifically, there's not much you can do about it unless, as a blanket rule, you decide that maybe WhatsApp is not the best form of communication for the practice, and you move something, to something more secure. So, for example, in South Africa, there is a product called Secure Chat from one of the vendors who plays in this space. A lot of the attorneys firms use it. So when let's say hypothetically, you're buying a house, and now the conveyancing attorney contacts you, part of their onboarding process is register on Secure Chat as a user. Now, all your communication is over Secure Chat. It is not over email. It's not over social media accounts. It's not over messaging account, and it's fully encrypted. So there are ways to do this, but it requires a little bit of hand-holding with your patients.
Okay.
The reality is
is
that not all hardware, the type of phone you're buying or the type of laptop you're buying, not all hardware and software is created equal. Some are more expensive than others because the security is much better. So when I spoke to you earlier about we have seen viruses being downloaded onto people's cell phones for the first time, that is on a very specific operating system. We've only seen it on that operating system. We haven't seen it on the competing operating system.
Okay.
And so part of your due diligence can be, if I'm prepared to outlay a little bit more money than I would like, the benefit from a security lift would really help from that perspective. So making some of those, what would you perceive to be mundane decisions, actually in the grand scheme of things could help you in the long run. So do I take this type of phone versus this type of phone? Do I take this type of laptop versus this type of laptop? And that can have make a big difference in your personal and practice.
You really don't think about those sort of things. You just go along your work thinking whatever gets me up and running the quickest,
Well, there's this old thing in my head that I always say, clients don't care about fraud until they become victims of fraud.
For sure.
And then all of a sudden they're hypervigilant. And the whole point of our discussion today is we don't want you to fall victim before you pay attention. Pay attention now before you fall victim to it, because some of these losses can be big. You can lose up to R1 million, $1 million US. I mean, in private practice, can you take a hit? Doesn't matter what currency it is. Can you take a hit of $1 million, 2 million, 3 million and still be in business tomorrow? There's not a lot of guys that could.
No, I really don't think people are paying attention like they should. Yeah. So here's hoping. So Kevin, what we normally do with our guests is say in a year's time, we'll come back again and revisit some of the things we say and see where we are. But I think we've kind of dealt with the future proofing and preparing for threats we can't yet imagine. But I'd just like to know, we always ask one big thing, the big question. If you had to pick one trend, one digital trend, what do you think we're going to see in the next year really exploding on this scene?
Sure, in the next year. So I think this AI thing I think is going to ramp up significantly. I think fraudsters are now attacking ecosystems not as individuals behind laptops, but they're actually getting the computer to do the attack. So you can scale up your attack vector, because if I'm attacking 100 people and only 5 fall for it, that's only a 5% success rate. So if I start to use AI and I use technology smart, I can increase it from 50% to 20% to 30%, and so my success rate will increase. So I think there's going to be a massive increase in AI and a massive increase in all these phishing and vishing and everything that we've spoken about, that it's the technology that's going to be doing it, not the human. All the human's going to do is initiate it and drive it. And so the banks are having to ramp up stuff significantly for clients, because the problem is that, and I want to say this to your readers, the banks don't send you fraud awareness communications and things to read because we're trying to bore you. We do it on purpose, because when you fall victim to fraud, when anyone falls victim, the first thing they do is come to the bank and say it's your fault, the bank's not secure. Meanwhile, it's got nothing to do with us, it's got zero to do with it. You have been manipulated. You have allowed the fraudsters to get in. You've given away your credentials. If I had 5 Rand for every time a client said to us, the bank's not secure, there's a leak in the bank, there's a fraudster in the bank, I'd be a very rich man today. And unfortunately, the problem is sitting in the chair. Us as human beings need to educate ourselves as to what's going on around us. Don't take an interest when you become a victim. Take an interest now.
Kevin, I think that's a good place for us to end our conversation today. It's been absolutely fantastic having you as our guest. I've learned a fortune myself. I think that's it for today then. Thanks for joining us. If you found this discussion helpful, please share this podcast with your colleagues. It's really important that we get this message out and get and just really wisen up as a profession. If you've got any ideas for future topics you'd like us to cover, visit the MedEd website and just fill out the forms that are there. We'll come back to you, and we're always open to discussing things that help you in your practice. Until next week, when we'll be taking another look at how AI is changing the practice of medicine. Stay safe, stay sane.
Thanks, Linda. Cheers.
Cheers.
You've been listening to the Medical Education Network.